Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back to my channel, Garden Cold Spring Harbor. I'm in Long Island, New York, Zone 7A. In today's video, I'm going to teach you everything you need to know when it comes to repotting a Phalaenopsis orchid, guys. In today's video, I'm going to teach you why, when, and most importantly, how to properly repot a Phalaenopsis orchid so it grows, blooms, and thrives for us for years and years to come. When you take proper care of Phalaenopsis orchids, they can live for 50 years and over, guys. When we see orchids in our local supermarkets or garden centers or nurseries, it's the beautiful coloring and the stunning blooms that almost always make us stop and look at them. And the beautiful coloring in the petals and the blooms. Just take a look at this one, guys. Look at this beautiful coloring. The beautiful, stunning deep green foliage is exactly what pushes us to purchase these stunners and bring them to our homes, guys. How can any of us say no to such a beautiful exotic plant? When we buy orchids from a supermarket or a local garden center, they look absolutely stunning, the blooms. However, what most of us tend not to realize is how unhappy these orchids are inside their existing pots and containers in which they are sold. When we see orchids being sold at a garden center, whether they're individual orchids or in a arrangement in some sort of a container or a basket, most of the time the container or a basket will be a solid container, meaning it will not have any air holes in them. Sometimes not even a drainage hole. Take a look at this, guys. This particular container has no drainage holes and no air holes around the container. When we bring our new orchid home and pull it out of the existing pot or container, only to find how unhappy this plant actually is and was in this existing container. Take a look, guys, at what is happening to this Phalaenopsis orchid's root system. Just take a look, guys. Some roots are dead. Some roots are in the process of dying. You could see that they're rotting. You could see the color of the old medium that's inside this container. You can basically see that these roots are being suffocated and they're not happy at all. Take a look at all these rotting roots in this orchid plant, and all because this orchid was never happy growing in the container in which it was sold at our local garden center. Just because visually this orchid plant might seem happy and beautiful based on the flowers, the buds, and the blooms, doesn't mean that this plant is happy. In fact, the truth hides below the surface, guys. This is all because our local garden center or a supermarket did not take proper care of this orchid plant. So if you keep your orchid in this same medium, in this same container, the way it is and was, your plant will not last long, and in fact might and will die off altogether. You will start seeing the flowers falling off. You will see the flower buds either not open up at all, start to shrivel up, or even if they bloom, these blooms will not be long lasting because the plant's root system is being waterlogged, being suffocated, causing the root system to mold and to die out. So this plant will absolutely need to be be repotted, and today I'm going to show you exactly how to do that. Orchids are known for their beautiful, gorgeous blooms. Their long spikes, which are typically always staked and then clipped together. The beautiful, broad, deep green colored foliage, and of course the beautiful long air roots, guys. Typically many people don't know how to properly water an orchid, and what happens is they tend to over water the orchid, causing the orchid's root system to stay waterlogged, hence start to rot and to die out. Some of us who don't know how to properly water an orchid just simply follow the instructions that come with the orchid, and many times the instructions simply say 2 cubes ice cubes once a week, which is a huge no, guys. And in today's video I'm also going to explain to you exactly why you shouldn't be watering your beautiful orchid plant using ice cubes, and how and when to properly water your orchid plant to maximal growing and blooming success. Most of the times Phalaenopsis orchids are sold in containers like this one, which has no aeration holes and absolutely no drainage holes either, which is a big no-no when it comes to growing orchids. So when choosing a container for when you're repotting your orchids, make sure that your container has both aeration holes throughout the container, around the container, as well as a drainage hole on the bottom of a container. So if your container will have both aeration holes and drainage hole, then this container is absolutely perfect and you will not have to customize anything. And these type of containers are widely sold in garden centers, nurseries, and even online, guys. So choosing the correct container is step number 1 when it comes to repotting a Phalaenopsis orchid. So some of the most common reasons as to why we should repot our Phalaenopsis orchid is: number 1, if our orchid outgrows its existing container. Number 2, if you see the aerial roots growing outside of its existing container. Reason number 3, if you see more roots than the medium inside your container, or if you see that after you water your orchid it dries out way too quickly, say in a day or 2, so that's way too quick for the medium to dry up. That is another possible reason to why we should be repotting our orchid, guys. Or if you purchase an Phalaenopsis orchid or somebody gifts it to you and you pull it out of its existing container in which it was sold, and you see what I am seeing over here is the roots are either rotting, some aerial roots are soft, mushy, and dead, and you could see how waterlogged these aerial roots are, which is exactly why I'm going to repot this Phalaenopsis orchid, guys, with you today. I wanted to show you exactly what is happening inside this existing container. So when I pull out this Phalaenopsis orchid, I want to show you that the existing container does not have any aerial holes in it. In fact, the only thing it has is a drainage hole on the bottom over here. But look what happens. You could see that all the water just tends to pull into the second container and sit there for days and days at a time, which is another reason as to why these aerial roots are so waterlogged and are starting to rot and to die out, guys. And that reason is improper container, guys. Orchids are not meant to be potted and to grow long term in a container like this one. Orchids are native to Southeast Asia. And in fact, orchids are epiphytes. What does epiphyte means? That means that they grow on other plants. In nature, orchids grow on tree branches and on tree bark, guys. When looking at a Phalaenopsis orchid, how can we tell whether an aerial root is dead or alive? Sometimes it might be quite hard to tell. So one of the easiest way to tell is by touching the aerial root. Aerial root, healthy, live aerial root, should be nice and firm to the touch. If the aerial root feels soft, mushy, it's wrinkled, shriveled up like this one, and has a different color pigmentation, that means that this aerial root is now dead and will no longer be absorbing any water or nutrients. So touching your aerial roots, and if you see like this one, it's absolutely hollow inside, it's soft and it's mushy, this aerial root is dead as well. So now, when you're trying to lift your orchid out of an existing container, never ever lift your orchid by its leaves or its foliage. The foliage is very, very delicate and you do not want to detach it from the root system. Always lift your orchid by the stake, like so. Here's the stake, and again, all the time, the stem of the orchid comes clipped or tied to a stake. So lifting your orchid by holding the stake like so, or trying to hold the orchid at the bottom, at the medium level, and lifting it out of the existing container. Again, guys, never ever try to lift your orchid by its stalk or by the foliage, as you can potentially detach it from the root system, hence you will end up killing your orchid. So now guys, we're going to now guys, before we start to repot this orchid, we have to pull it out of its existing medium and take a look at all of its roots, guys. So in this case, this orchid was growing in a bark. I wanted to show you what bark, orchid bark, looks like. However, you could see that this bark is already starting to disintegrate because you could see how tiny these pieces are. So we're going to remove this orchid out of its existing pot and existing medium. You will need some sort of a plate or a pan when removing the orchid out of a container so you don't make too much of a mess, guys. So here you go, guys. I'm going to gently squeeze the bottom of the container and wiggle, 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 wiggle. You don't want to force it because you don't want to damage it. See, look at all this debris that's coming out, the medium. Opa, gentle, gentle, gentle. You could see that some roots got stuck at the bottom. There you go, guys. We pulled out this orchid from its existing medium. I'm gonna try to gently shake off as much of the old bark as possible. And take a look, guys, in the middle. So this orchid was growing in two different mediums. The exterior medium, the outer medium, was the bark. And there is a coconut coir in the center over here. So this is another reason why these roots were being so waterlogged and they started to basically rot out and die. So we must remove as much, if not all, of the old medium first. Inspect the roots, remove any roots that seem to be diseased, seem to be mushy, soft, dead. So anything that's not healthy looking and firm to the touch must be removed from this orchid. So now guys, that we removed majority of the old medium, we can have a better look at this orchid's root system, guys. Again, the easiest way to tell if an aerial root is dead or dying is by touching it. If it's soft, hollow, mushy to the touch like this one is, then this root is completely dead. If the root feels firm to the touch like this one, this aerial root is well alive, guys. Now, if you're seeing a change in color of the roots, like here, say your aerial roots are more yellow or more pale or even off-white in color, this discoloration does not mean that these roots are dead. What does discoloration mean is that these particular aerial roots were lacking photosynthesis while being in the old container. So these roots got so waterlogged in the middle that they were lacking photosynthesis, guys. Hence the change in the coloring. So we do not cut these aerial roots off. Look, they're nice and firm to the touch. This coloration is absolutely fine, guys. So orchids are epiphytes, guys. Again, in nature, they grow on top of trees and tree bark, guys. So it is very important to note what medium you're going to be transplanting your orchid into. So there are two options when it comes to medium in transplanting orchids. So the first option is moss, specifically sphagnum moss, not any other moss, guys. Make sure that if you are choosing moss as the medium for your orchid, make sure it's sphagnum moss. They're sold in various garden centers, nurseries, and you could see this package, for example, even has clear transplanting instructions for orchids, guys. So when using sphagnum moss, there are good and bad aspects to it. Sphagnum moss is a great medium to use for orchids and other epiphytic plants. Why? Because it's very lightweight, it's very absorbent, and it has nice drainage properties, guys. Also, it doesn't compact as easily as some other mediums, hence allowing our plants' aerial roots to breathe better. Sphagnum moss does have its drawbacks as well, guys. Some of the drawbacks are that it's hard to keep sphagnum moss evenly moist. And if it dries out completely in a container, it's going to be very, very difficult to evenly remoisten it once again. Another drawback is that if not kept a close eye on, it could harbor and grow fungi as well as other bacteria. So if you are choosing to use sphagnum moss for your orchid plant, make sure that you keep a very close eye on it and repot your orchids accordingly if needed. Another perfect medium for growing orchids or other epiphytic plants is orchid mix, or otherwise known as orchid bark, guys. So here you go, guys. I just wanted to show you exactly what orchid bark looks like. It's a great medium, and when in fresh, clean, brand new condition. Your bark pieces should be relatively large in size. And I want to show you a comparison between new bark versus the old bark, the old medium that was in the initial container in which this orchid was potted in. You could see the difference in the sizing of the bark. You could see how nice and large the new bark pieces are versus how little, how broken down and disintegrated the old bark is, guys. So this is exactly what happens to the bark over a period of a year to 2 years. It starts to break down, decompose, and disintegrate, which is why when growing our orchids in the orchid mix or orchid bark, we should be repotting our orchid between 1 to 2 years, depending on the condition of the existing bark inside our pot or container. Orchid bark is a very popular option when it comes to the medium. Why? Because it's very lightweight. It absorbs moisture great, guys. And orchids are very, very happy growing in this medium as it's very, very close to their natural habitat, natural environment, guys. Remember, they grow in nature on trees and on tree bark. However, it does tend to break down more quickly rather than sphagnum moss. Hence, we might have to repot our orchid more often if growing in a orchid mix medium. Orchid bark is actually also originally from New Zealand. It is made from pine tree bark. But here they use different bark when creating this mix. So orchid bark gives very, very good air circulation. But however, you must let the orchid bark fully dry out before rewatering it again, guys. The next very important thing to consider when repotting our orchid plant is, of course, the sizing of the container that we choose. We want to make sure that the new container will be very similarly sized as the previous container, guys. We do not want to choose a container that is going to be too large in the size, as orchids do like to have their roots kind of snug in the container. You do not want to choose a container that is too big, hence might have too many air gaps or air holes in the medium. If you do choose to go with a larger size container, make sure that the new container will only be about 1 time larger than the previous container. So not too large, guys. As you could see here, the new container in which I will be repotting my orchid is pretty much exactly the same size as the old container. The only difference is that the new container has aerial holes around the entire container, as well as a good drainage hole right in the middle, versus the old container that had no aeration holes and no drainage hole either. And look how much water was accumulating on the bottom. Hence, the roots were sitting in all this moisture. When I pulled this orchid out of the old medium, I came to realize that it was potted in 2 different mediums. So in the middle of the root system, there's coconut coir, which is actually the wrong medium to use for growing orchids. And the other medium was the orchid bark, which is again started to disintegrate because you could see how tiny these bark pieces are. So I got rid of the bark medium, and now I'm gently going to use my fingers to get in the center here and to get rid of all of this coconut coir. You got to be very delicate, very gentle. You don't want to break or damage the aerial roots on our orchid, guys. So here is the coconut coir plug that was in the center of the root system. I gently used my fingers to pull it out. So what's bad with using coconut coir as a medium for orchids is that it absorbs and retains too much water, guys. Way too much water, if anything. So if you see that your plant's roots have been sitting in a coconut coir plug, you should remove all of that medium. As you can see here, I removed that coconut coir from the center, and now all of the roots are nicely exposed. So now you want to remove as much of old medium as possible. If it's giving you a hard time and you're not able to shake it off or gently use your fingers to take it off, you can rinse the root system of your orchid under tap water prior to replanting it. I had quite great success over here, so I will not be rinsing out my orchid's root system. I will be just simply transplanting it right now the way it is, right after I cut off all of the damaged, rotten, and dead aerial roots. So now let's inspect the damage, if I may call it that. Take a very close look at the root system and remove any and all of rotting or dead aerial roots from this orchid, and then we can pot it up in the new container. So again, the best way to tell is to feel your roots nice and firm. That means this root is still healthy and alive. If you see anything like this, damage, you could see there's no more venom in there. This is a dead or dying aerial root, needs to be pruned off. Anything that's hollow, soft, you could see there's absolutely nothing on the inside of this aerial root. So this aerial root is dead as well. So now you're going to need either a clean pair of scissors or pruning shears in order to trim off the dead or diseased aerial roots. So now guys, what I like to do is, if the root, aerial root, feels soft, wrinkled, mushy to me, what I do is I follow the roots all the way towards the foliage to see whether the entire root is dead and hollow or there is still some texture and firmness. So this aerial root happens to be dead only to a certain point. Here you can feel the aerial root is nice and firm to the touch again. So what I do is I use clean scissors and I will cut this root like so, getting rid of the dead end of the root and of course keeping the nice and firm section of the root. And I go around every single root and I essentially do the same. I follow the root up towards the foliage where I start to feel firmness again. I cut the root like so. Again guys, the discoloration doesn't matter. This simply means lack of photosynthesis. It's how firm the root is. Here again, you could see you follow the root up and you cut like so. Any root that feels mushy, soft, hollow, we will cut off like so. So now that I'm done cutting off any of the diseased and the dead aerial roots, the next thing to do is to follow the main stem up, and we want to trim the stem a bit guys, the stalk. You do not want to trim it all the way down to the foliage because then it's going to take years and years for your orchid to rebloom. So the rule of thumb is 3 nodes up from the foliage. So these guys over here, These are called nodes, and you could see that they take place every few inches. So going up, we want to count 3 nodes, and over the 3rd node that's exactly where we're going to cut the flower stalk. Of course, get rid of the piece that we cut off and re-tie or re-clip our stalk again to the stake that was originally with the orchid. So because sphagnum moss is very light, very airy, it's most of the time sold absolutely dry in a packaging. So before placing sphagnum moss in our new container, we should always pre-soak it with tap water, guys. You do not want to leave it dripping down, but it should have a decent amount of moisture to it. I'm using room temperature tap water to soak. I will squeeze out any of excess moisture, but you do want your sphagnum moss to be relatively moist. You could see how quickly sphagnum moss absorbed all that water, which is exactly what I mentioned previously, why it makes an excellent medium for orchids, guys. There you go. Let it sit for a few minutes, a few seconds. You could see that it's moist. So any excess moisture you do want to squeeze out prior to placing in the container. So now what I'm going to do is, here is my orchid with trimmed clean root system. We trimmed the main stalk. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place some orchid bark at the bottom of my new container. Not much, guys, a decent layer, like so. Now what I want to do is I want to position my orchid. Again, guys, be very delicate. You do not want to break off the root system. Wiggle, like so. You want to make sure that the bottom portion of your foliage is at the top level of your new container, like so. You want to tuck in the aerial roots. And now, using our hands, if there's any excess moisture, again, guys, we squeeze it out. And now we want to fill in the container all around the roots, guys. We do not want to leave large air pockets, air gaps, guys. Using our fingers, we go all around the root system, guys, like so. If you want, maybe you can tap your container, shake it like so to make sure that your moss is evenly coating and surrounding the root system, like so. Again, guys, try to fill it in as compact as you possibly can to avoid any big air pockets. Almost done, guys. Shake off, squeeze out as much moisture as you can. We want sphagnum moss moist, but not soaking wet, like so. So here you go, guys. My Phalaenopsis orchid has been successfully repotted. So I used orchid bark to fill the quarter bottom portion of the new container, and I filled the rest with moistened sphagnum moss. You could see over here. So I positioned my orchid evenly in the center, with the bottom portion of the foliage being right in line with the upper portion of this new container. So there you go. And now I'm going to bring it inside and position it in my green room. However, for those of you who prefer growing orchids on your windowsills, just a quick reminder, make sure you choose a windowsill with eastern sun exposure, guys. Good amount of morning sunlight followed by shade in the afternoon. Orchids do prefer bright yet indirect sunlight exposure with air temperatures anywhere between 70 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit, guys. And your orchid will be one happy plant. This is it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for joining me on this gorgeous fall day in Long Island, New York, Zone 7A. In today's video, I taught you guys exactly how to successfully repot a Phalaenopsis orchid. I gave you guys step-by-step instructions as to how, when, and why we should repot our Phalaenopsis orchid, guys. For those of you who enjoyed the content of today's video, if you found this video to be helpful, useful, informative in any way, show me that support by clicking thumbs up below. Leave your comment in the comment section below. Let me know, do you grow orchids in your home? How often do you repot your orchids? What kind of medium do you use when you repot your orchid, guys? For those of you who are not yet subscribed to my gardening channel, Gardening Cold Spring Harbor, what are you waiting for, guys? It's super easy for you to do, yet so pleasing and rewarding to me, knowing that you guys enjoy watching my videos, that you find the content of my videos to be informative and helpful in your own home gardening. Click the bell icon as well if you want YouTube to notify you every single time I'll upload a new garden video. Now be healthy, happy, be well, each and every single one of you, and happy gardening, guys. And I'll see you again in my new upcoming garden videos. Sammy says bye as well, right, Sammy? Bye, guys. See you soon.